Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Kraft, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, I'm going to be talking about my Week 16 waiver wire targets for the 2023 fantasy football season. Now, if you're watching this, congratulations. You are one step closer to capturing a 2023 fantasy football championship as you have found yourself victorious in Week 15. Now, for those of you who didn't even participate in Week 15 because you had a first-round bye, welcome back to reality. And when I talk about reality, I'm talking about the reality of injuries that have taken place just this last week. I mean, prior to going into Week 15, we had players of the caliber of Tyreek Hill, Chris Olave, Josh Jacobs, Keenan Allen, Christian Watson, Nico Collins, CJ Stroud, and Brian Robinson Jr. Players who have helped us and carried our teams for the entirety of this season who didn't even participate. Then we had players that got injured mid-game like Keaton Mitchell, Jamar Chase, Jaden Reed, Michael Pittman Jr., which was a brutal hit, Zach Moss, Trevor Lawrence, Zay Jones, Marquise Brown, and there are more names that I can name and continue on, but we'll be here all day. Either way, injuries have definitely impacted our teams, but as we progress towards Week 16, the entire point of today's episode is to provide players that you can go ahead and pick up, not only to help you capture a victory in Week 16, but also provide depth in the case of an injury popping up in the upcoming weeks. And if it does take place, you'll be prepared to go ahead, plug them into your lineup, and of course, find yourself victorious. Now, as we progress throughout today's episode, I'll be mentioning players at all positions: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, kicker, and defenses, the best available players in majority of leagues, so that you can go ahead and set yourself up for success. Before we get into that, again, a couple reminders. If you guys are looking for a specific player, there are timestamps down in the description. While you're down there, if you've yet to do so already, be sure to go ahead and subscribe to the channel. We're making daily fantasy football content for the entirety of the season in order to help you guys out to the best of my ability. Thank you very much. Also, at the end of today's episode, I'll be putting together a couple pick'em slips for tonight's game between the Philadelphia Eagles and, of course, Seattle Seahawks. Be sure to go ahead, check out the link down in the description, heading on over to Underdog Fantasy. You can go ahead, sign up today via Underdog Fantasy using code Andrew, making that first time deposit minimum of $10, not only to get the first time deposit match and also potentially follow with the upcoming pick'em plays, but get my rankings every single Sunday for the remainder of the season, which include by position, by tier, half PPR, full PPR, and flex rankings. So take advantage of the opportunity and of course start drafting teams today. For those of you wondering if you're eligible, be sure to check out the map to the right side of the screen to determine your eligibility. Thank you very much for all the support. All right, so let's talk about some waiver wire pickups, beginning with the running back position. As you can see, 1 through 3 begins with Ty Chandler, Trey Sermon, and Roschon Johnson. Again, at this current juncture, there are very few running backs that are potentially available in your league that could make an immediate impact going into Week 16. So we begin with Ty Chandler, a running back who is currently rostered in 52% of Yahoo leagues, coming off an incredible performance of 23.2 half PPR fantasy points. 23 carries, a $123 on the ground, a lot of 23s there, and also scored a rushing touchdown throughout this game. In the first drive of the game for the Minnesota Vikings, Ty Chandler accumulated 10.6 fantasy points. So obviously he started out hot and they continue to run with him for the entirety of the game. And he found a lot of success up until overtime. Now, as we progress, with Alexander Mattison still expected to miss time due to the high ankle sprain that he sustained a couple weeks back, the expectation is that Ty Chandler will be featured within this backfield. We even heard from Kevin O'Connell earlier today that he said that we're going to continue to feature Ty Chandler, which is fantastic. Amongst all running backs thus far this season that have a minimum of 50 rushing attempts, Ty Chandler is number 13 amongst all of them in terms of yards per carry, 4.65. An efficient running back in this offense is exactly what we wanted all season long, and we are finding it here with Ty Chandler late in the season. Moving on to Trey Sermon. In Saturday's game between the Indianapolis Colts and Pittsburgh Steelers, we saw that Zach Moss, on the same play in which he scored a touchdown in the receiving game, went down with an injury. He did not return from the said injury, and in his absence, we saw Trey Sermon, 17 carries for 88 rushing yards, ran completely through that Pittsburgh Steelers defense. And Tyler Goodson also had himself 11 carries for 69 rushing yards, 2 catches, 10 receiving yards, 8.9 fantasy points. This duo of running backs in the absence of Zach Moss obviously found themselves a lot of success. And this upcoming week, they take on the Atlanta Falcons under the assumption that Zach Moss is not able to return from said injury, and Jonathan Taylor isn't going to be returning from his injury. Trey Sermon, who is currently rostered in quite literally 0% of leagues, would be the lead back of this offense going into the matchup. And we all know this is a run-first offense, and there is a potential in which, of course, Michael Pittman Jr. could miss due to the concussion. It'll continue to lean towards more opportunity for Trey Sermon within the given week. The number 3 option at running back that I wanted to mention is Roschon Johnson. Even though last week the narrative between this backfield was D'Onta Foreman is going to be the lead guy, he's getting the vast majority of overall opportunities and snaps. You know, D'Onta Foreman fumbles in this game, and then it's all Roschon Johnson. Roschon Johnson 5 carries for 36 rushing yards, 6 targets, 4 catches, 24 receiving yards. Found himself playing 37 of the overall offensive snaps, while D'Onta Foreman only played 18 and Khalil Herbert only played 17. So if Roschon Johnson, the rookie running back, is going to continue to be prioritized within this backfield going forward, taking on the Arizona Cardinals this week, the most advantageous matchup at the running back position in terms of rushing statistics isolated, we know that Roschon Johnson is a capable receiving back, but if you're going to give him opportunity on the ground as well, he is going to be a fantastic play going into this upcoming week. Okay, so that covers it in terms of the top 3 backs that I wanted to mention. One, currently rostered in 52% of leagues, the other 0%, and of course, Roschon Johnson, lastly, 21%. Now let's move on to the wide receiver conversation, beginning with Noah Brown. Obviously, earlier this season, we have seen Noah Brown find himself a lot of success within this Houston Texans offense, and it did not stop this week, despite the fact that Case Keenum, of all quarterbacks, was playing as the starting quarterback of the Houston Texans. In this game, Noah Brown started out hot very early. I mean, I remember watching on Red Zone. I'm looking at the bottom of the screen as the tag is rolling along in terms of like player stats, and I see 5 catches for 56 yards, like midway through the second quarter for someone like Noah Brown. He accumulated 11 total targets, 8 catches, 82 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown. Overall, if he's going to continue to be the number 1 wide receiver of this offense, especially in the return of CJ Stroud, of course, he's going to have value. Nico Collins had a potential of returning last week, and even if Nico Collins is to return this week, I think that helps the case and the cause of Noah Brown, especially considering they're taking on the Cleveland Browns. A very tough secondary, but nonetheless, the Houston Texans are a very competitive offense. The fact that they were able to come back and beat the Tennessee Titans yesterday just gives you an idea as to how competitive they are, especially once they get back their number 1 wide receiver and, of course, their number 1 quarterback. And I expect Noah Brown to continue to be a consistent play going forward for fantasy purposes. Our number 2 is Curtis Samuel, currently rostered in 37% of leagues, coming off a week in which he had 2 receiving touchdowns. I mean, he has had himself a nose for the end zone all season long. They have designed many of plays in order to get him open and find a lot of success. And that's exactly what we found once again against the Los Angeles Rams in that second half. This week, they take on the New York Jets. And even though it's a very tough matchup, whether it's Sam Howell or Jacoby Brissett, we know that he's going to find success, as him and Terry McLaurin obviously had themselves great performances yesterday. And I believe that's only going to continue as we progress within an offense that is passing the ball more than anybody in the National Football League thus far this season. Moving on to our number 3, we have Joshua Palmer. Again, if in fact the Los Angeles Chargers potentially shut down Keenan Allen, it is only going to make Joshua Palmer an easier play within the given week. Joshua Palmer is coming off a performance in which he had 4 targets, 4 catches, a $113 and a touchdown. Obviously broke a 7-yard receiving touchdown on broken coverage. Nonetheless, as long as this offense is going to continue to give him opportunities, I know that they take on the Buffalo Bills this week. It will be a negative game script, and if in fact Easton Stick can look in his direction, potentially Joshua Palmer can continue to be the number 1 receiving option of this offense, especially in the absence of Keenan Allen potentially being shut down for the remainder of the year, considering they're not vying for a playoff position. Moving on, let's talk about number 4 through 6 at the wide receiver position, beginning with Demarcus Robinson, who's coming off his 3rd consecutive game of a receiving touchdown within this offense, has jumped himself into the starting lineup, of course, in the absence of Tutu Atwell. As long as Matthew Stafford continues to play as well as he has, and Demarcus Robinson is going to benefit from that, coming off a week in which he had 2 receptions, 44 receiving yards, a receiving touchdown, 1 rushing attempt for 23 rushing yards, as long as the opportunities are there, especially going up against the New Orleans Saints on Thursday Night Football, a defense that has struggled heavily in their secondary in the absence of Marshawn Lattimore, I would anticipate that Demarcus Robinson can continue to be of value for fantasy purposes. Currently only rostered in 8% of leagues. Moving on to our number 5, we have Tyler Boyd. Obviously, because of the injury to Jamar Chase, the separated shoulder, the expectation is that Jamar Chase will miss time. We don't know exactly how long that is going to be, but in his absence, T. Higgins is going to be the number 1, and Tyler Boyd is absolutely going to have to step up and become the number 2 of this offense, which he's certainly capable of accomplishing. On number 6, Dontayvion Wicks. Another wide receiver that is benefiting from injuries to his own teammates. Both Christian Watson and Jaden Reed could potentially miss in week 16. Of course, Christian Watson dealing with a hamstring injury for the last couple weeks. Jaden Reed sustained an injury in Sunday's game, left and did not return. If in fact both of those players are going to be missing, Dontayvion Wicks, who's coming off a performance in which he had 7 targets, 6 catches, 97 receiving yards, 12.7 fantasy points and a half PPR. If he's going to continue to get himself a high volume of opportunity, taking on the Carolina Panthers could be of value, considering, of course, the fact that, Romeo Doubs, as much as we want him to perform, for some reason, without Christian Watson on the field, has been doing nothing as of late. Let's move on to the conversation of tight ends and quarterbacks, beginning with our number 1 at the tight end position, Hunter Henry. We know that Hunter Henry sustained an injury in Sunday's game. If in fact he can power through it, currently only rostered in 24% of leagues, and play against the Denver Broncos this week, we just saw Sam Laporta torch this defense, and we're coming off of a week in which he scored another touchdown, had the most targets amongst all receiving options within this offense. This is 2 consecutive weeks in which he scored a touchdown, and it could have been 2 consecutive games of which he scored 2 touchdowns. His second touchdown was called back due to a penalty. So if in fact Bailey Zappi is going to continue to look in the direction of Hunter Henry, taking on the Denver Broncos, a very advantageous matchup, I would assume he could be picked up and played immediately going into week 16 as long as he's healthy. Our number 2 here is Tucker Kraft, the rookie tight end for the Green Bay Packers. In the absence of Luke Musgrave and now Christian Watson and potentially Jaden Reed, Tucker Kraft is going to have an opportunity to step up. He's currently only rostered in 10% of leagues, coming off a performance against an advantageous matchup in which he had 4 catches, 57 and a touchdown. If Green Bay Packers receiving options continue to get injured, it is going to give more opportunities to guys like Tucker Kraft, Dontayvion Wicks that we talked about a little bit earlier. Tucker Kraft's not a bad option taking on the Carolina Panthers this upcoming week. The final option at tight end is Tanner Hudson, currently only rostered in 4% of leagues. Just like we talked about with Tyler Boyd, in the absence of Jamar Chase, there's going to be more target opportunity within this offense. So with that being the reality of the situation, taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers this upcoming week, there could be an opportunity for Tanner Hudson to find himself success, especially considering how much success the Indianapolis Colts tight ends found against that defense. Now, I could end up mentioning someone like Zach Ertz, but again, he hasn't signed anywhere yet. He's not someone that we can potentially hope will sign in the coming weeks and will immediately make an impact within the given team. So I wouldn't waste the roster spot there, but I just wanted to mention him as an honorable mention for those of you who were wondering. Let's move on to the quarterback conversation. The 3 quarterbacks that you can see on screen currently, Baker Mayfield, Jake Browning, and Gardner Minshew, should probably already be rostered, especially considering how well they have played all season long. So if in fact they're not already rostered, please do yourself a favor and pick them up if you are in need of a quarterback going into this week. I mean, we're talking about Baker Mayfield, who's coming off a performance in which he's the first quarterback in NFL history to go to Lambeau Field and complete a game in which he had a perfect passer rating. Jake Browning has had himself over 18 fantasy points in a 4-point per passing touchdown format in each of the last 3 starts that he has made. Gardner Minshew has dominated all season long. He's coming off a performance of 3 passing touchdowns. And as long as they continue to win games, which they consistently do, of course, he's going to be relevant for fantasy purposes. But we also wanted to mention some players that may be widely available and perhaps you may be looking for in the absence of your starting quarterback. We have Joe Flacco, again, the thumbnail of today's video, someone who has been able to put up dominant performances for 3 consecutive games. He's been able to get himself 3 consecutive games of over 44 passing attempts, which have led to 16 plus fantasy points in each of the last 3 contests. If he's available in your league, once again, taking on the Houston Texans, an advantageous matchup in regards to their secondary, should be a solid play. Derek Carr, even in the absence of Chris Olave, Michael Thomas put up a great performance of 3 passing touchdowns. I would say based on the 82% passing completion percentage, that's the best game that Derek Carr has played all season long. And it was against the New York Giants, which again is a defense that likes to blitz and it likes to make quarterbacks uncomfortable. But Derek Carr played very well in that overall game. Takes on the LA Rams on Thursday. So again, it's a short week. He will probably not have Olave, and it could be a little bit more of a difficult matchup, but nonetheless could be widely available in your league. The final quarterback I wanted to mention is Nick Mullens. Nick Mullens coming off a game in which he had a couple ugly interceptions, yet still ended up scoring himself 17.12 fantasy points. As long as he's going to continue to have all these weapons surrounding him, Addison, Jefferson, Hawkinson, Chandler, these are great options for him to continue to throw the ball to, and they're probably going to be in a negative game script taking on the Detroit Lions. All right, with that covered, let's move on to kickers and defenses to close out today's waiver wire section of today's episode. So we begin with kickers. These 3 kickers are all rostered in less than 5% of Yahoo leagues. Cairo Santos, Kaimi Fairbairn, and Chase McLaughlin. They've all played extremely well as of late. Kaimi Fairbairn, of course, coming off of injury, just most recently put up 17 points in fantasy against the Tennessee Titans. As they progress in a difficult matchup against the Cleveland Browns, could end up doing the same even with CJ Stroud at quarterback. Cairo Santos has had himself multiple weeks of double-digit fantasy points. This last week obviously wasn't able to accomplish that, but still one of the better options at kicker, taking on the Arizona Cardinals this week. We have Chase McLaughlin at the back end of this conversation. As long as Baker Mayfield continues to play well, which he has had each of the last 2 games, my expectation is that Chase McLaughlin should continue to score fantasy points coming off of back-to-back weeks of double-digit points. Let's move on to defenses. If these 3 defenses are somehow available, which I don't think they are, but if they, in fact they are, the Bills rostered in 74%, Eagles 74%, Broncos 47%. The Bills take on the Chargers, the Eagles take on the Giants, and the Denver Broncos take on the New England Patriots. Those are 3 advantageous matchups for these defenses. If they're available, please pick them up. Do yourself a favor. Now, if in fact these 3 defenses are potentially available in your league, you can also do yourself a favor in this circumstance. You have the Indianapolis Colts taking on the Atlanta Falcons. Arthur Smith continues to hamstring his own teams. He gave the ball to Bijan Robinson, I think, 7 times yesterday in a rain game. pretty underwhelming to say the least. But again, the Indianapolis Colts defense playing extremely well, causes turnovers, score points, and they will continue to do so this week. The Chicago Bears, speaking of scoring points as a defense, in the last 4 games alone, they have had 12 sacks, 12 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries, and a defensive touchdown. They're dominating as a defense, only rostered in 14% of leagues. The Cincinnati Bengals, they take on the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it was announced earlier today that Mason Rudolph will be the starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, what more could we ask for in this circumstance? We're firing up the Cincinnati Bengals defense. Now, the final defense that I wanted to mention is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. If, in fact, we get into a situation in which potentially Trevor Lawrence is not active due to the concussion protocol that he is in, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars can be an advantageous matchup, to say the very least, for their defense. All right, that covers it in regards to waiver wire pickups for week 16. Thank you everybody for watching. Let's go ahead and transition and close out today's episode with a couple pick'em slips for tonight's game between the Philadelphia Eagles and Seattle Seahawks. Let's check that out right now. So going into tonight's game, we get one of 2 things. We either get the Jordan flu game out of Jalen Hurts, or potentially we get a game in which the Philadelphia Eagles want to emphasize running the ball in order to get DeAndre Swift back on track. I think that is going to take place. I think DeAndre Swift is very easily going to be able to surpass 57.5 rushing yards. Considering, of course, the Seattle Seahawks have struggled mightily all season long in terms of stopping the run, and the fact that the Philadelphia Eagles have ignored running the ball over the course of the last 2 games, mainly because they've been blown out of those games. The Dallas Cowboys and San Francisco 49ers definitely put a number on them quickly, and it evaporated the running game and the priority of it. So going into this game, which I believe will be closer between these 2 teams, DeAndre Swift should be an emphasis for the Eagles offense and absolutely should be able to accomplish this 57.5 rushing yard total. Now on the other side of the ball, when we're talking about the Seattle Seahawks, in order to complete this pick'em slip, I'm looking at either DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett. I like both of them going into this week, regardless of who's playing quarterback, whether it's Drew Lock or Geno Smith. Understand that this is not only the best matchup at the wide receiver position, but Darius Slay, the number 1 cornerback of this defense, is now out. He had a knee scope earlier in the week, according to Nick Sirianni, and he's not going to be playing within this game. So honestly, I like both DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett going over their receiving yard totals. So I'm honestly going to take both, regardless of who's playing at quarterback. Those are the 3 plays that I would like to take going into tonight's game. I'm going to go ahead and fire that up right now. Now, as of late, I will admit, I have not been on fire in terms of pick and plays. There have been a couple plays here and there that have helped me break even, but more often than not, the plays that I think that have a very high percentage of success, typically as of late, have fallen to, either injury, like Michael Pittman Jr. not being able to get himself, 7 or more receptions as of late. TJ Hawkinson was literally a half a target away from completing his. On Thursday's game, Austin Eckler was a half a yard away from completing his. Again, I've been, hooked as of late in some scenarios. In others, just bad luck. Will Levis scoring a rushing touchdown instead of Derrick Henry yesterday, literally on the 1-yard line. That is brutal. But nonetheless, if you want to go ahead, there are many of plays to take advantage of, whether it's tonight's games, whether it's the NBA, all that kind of jazz via Underdog Fantasy. So check out the link down in the description. Use code Andrew, support the channel. Thank you, everybody. Tomorrow, I'll be back with the running back rankings at a top 36 capacity. And until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.